Have you ever found yourself in a situation where a seemingly minor mistake ended up having significant consequences? Well, that's what happened to me, and I had no idea things would turn out this way. Trust plays a crucial role in any relationship, and it takes a lot of hard work to build it, but it can be shattered with just one wrong move. Unfortunately, I made that mistake, and I still regret it to this day. I'm a 36-year-old woman, and I'm married to my husband, who is 40 years old. We've been married for 2 years now. My husband is a professor at our local university, and I work there as an assistant professor. I joined the university 3 years ago because they offered a good salary and shorter working hours compared to my previous job. My husband holds a senior position at the same university, and he's highly respected there. I actually met my husband at the university when I was hired as an assistant professor to work under his supervision. He was even part of my interview process. I developed an immediate crush on him because he was intelligent and fun. I was ecstatic when I got the job working alongside him. Our roles required us to work closely together, attending classes and grading papers together. Spending so much time together naturally led to us getting to know each other better. Our relationship started with casual conversations and jokes, but it soon progressed to having lunch together and spending even more time with each other. The attraction between us was mutual, and it didn't take long before we officially became a couple. After being together for a year, my husband proposed to me, and I accepted. I enjoyed his company, and I was impressed by his respected position at the college. His authoritative demeanor was something I found attractive, and he always took good care of me. So I said yes, and we had a small wedding ceremony to celebrate our union. Our married life was going smoothly. I had moved into his cozy bungalow, and we were happily living together. Our life together was going quite well, especially since we also worked together. I was content and satisfied in my marriage, feeling like I had everything I ever desired. My husband embodied the qualities of a perfect alpha male, strong, confident, and charismatic. He had a clear sense of purpose and knew how to achieve his goals. I deeply admired his intelligence and strong work ethic. I believed we were an ideal match. However, I ended up losing him due to a small mistake I made a year into our marriage. A mistake I never thought would have such severe consequences. I deeply wish I could undo that mistake. It all began when a new assistant professor joined our university, whom we'll refer to as George. George was around my age, and he had an appealing charm, self-assuredness, and I must admit, he was quite attractive. We had casual conversations a few times before, but nothing out of the ordinary. However, one day, when my husband was out of town and I was working from a cafe near the university, George and I coincidentally ran into each other. We both ordered coffee and started chatting. The conversation was lighthearted and enjoyable, covering various topics from work to our personal lives. George was single and had recently moved to town. He was easy to talk to, and before I knew it, a few hours had passed. We exchanged phone numbers and promised to stay in touch. At that moment, I didn't attach much significance to it. I liked talking to George, but I was happily married to my husband. Little did I realize that this seemingly small mistake of exchanging numbers with George would trigger a series of events that would completely disrupt my life. Over the next few weeks, George and I began texting each other. Initially, our messages were about work and our hobbies, but gradually, they took a flirtatious turn. At first, I couldn't believe it. I was sure that everyone knew I was married and who my husband was. George started sending subtly flirtatious texts, and although I could have chosen to ignore them, I didn't. Instead, I responded in a flirtatious manner myself. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't seem to control myself. I only messaged him when my husband wasn't around because I couldn't risk my husband finding out. I thought I was just having harmless fun with our texts, not doing anything terribly wrong. Then, one day, my husband and I had a major argument. He wanted to have a baby, but I had previously told him that I wasn't ready for parenthood. We had discussed this before, and I had been clear about not wanting a baby at this time. Raising a child comes with significant responsibilities, and I didn't believe I was prepared for that level of commitment. I tried explaining this to my husband, but he was too angry to listen. He said hurtful things, accusing me of running away from responsibilities due to my nature. His words deeply upset me, and he left the house to have some space. I was home alone, feeling upset and vulnerable after our fight. That's when George messaged me, asking if I wanted to meet for a drink. I hesitated at first, but the temptation was strong, so I agreed to see him. Since my husband needed space away from me, I felt it was fair for me to have some space as well. I thought it would be okay to meet with George under the circumstances. As I texted George, I made up my mind to meet him that night. We chose a bar located far from the university, on the outskirts of town, to minimize the chances of running into anyone who might recognize me there. The bar had a fantastic atmosphere, with dim lights and soft music creating the perfect setting for a night out. We indulged in drinks, and our conversation remained light and enjoyable. However, things began to spiral out of control as the night wore on. I ended up getting extremely drunk, ordering multiple shots of vodka. George remained with me throughout the night, and our flirting became more intense. It felt like we were the only two people in the world, and I momentarily forgot about the fight with my husband. It was a relief to escape the marital stress, even if only temporarily. The chemistry between George and me was undeniable, unlike anything I had experienced before. That night, I made a terrible mistake by cheating on my husband. Afterward, George walked me to my cab as we waited on the pavement. While we stood there, he kissed me. He gave me ample time and space to pull away, but I didn't. I kissed him back. I was so intoxicated that I didn't fully grasp the situation until the following morning when I woke up with a severe hangover. It took me some time to come to terms with the events of the previous night. The memory of my kiss with George rushed back, and I instantly thought, "Oh no, what have I done?" I left the bedroom and found my husband in the kitchen, appearing much calmer than the day before. He asked where I had been the previous night, and I told him I had gone out with my friends. He nodded and then apologized for the argument we had the day before. He reassured me that there was no rush to have a baby and that he'd give me all the time I needed to make that decision. He was eager to start a family, but he understood my concerns. Overwhelmed by guilt for my actions the previous night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had betrayed my husband's trust. While it was just a kiss, it weighed heavily on my conscience. I deeply regretted my mistake, but there was no way to undo it. I knew I had made a serious error in judgment, and the remorse was eating me up inside. I wanted to confess to my husband, but I was paralyzed by fear. I dreaded his reaction, fearing that he might discover my indiscretion and choose to leave me. I knew him well enough to understand that he wouldn't easily forgive something like this. Later, when I went back to my bedroom, I noticed text messages from George. He had messaged me the previous night, inquiring if I had arrived home safely. His texts also expressed his enjoyment of our kiss and a desire to meet again. I immediately blocked him, unable to bear the weight of my dishonesty any longer. The guilt of not being truthful with my husband continued to eat away at me. I loved him deeply, and the thought of breaking his heart with the truth was agonizing, yet I couldn't muster the courage to confess what had transpired between George and me. Every night, I lay in bed motionless, replaying the moment when I made my terrible mistake. The guilt and fear weighed on me like a physical burden, pressing down on my chest. I had been carrying this guilt since that fateful day, yet I still lacked the courage to confess to my husband. Each time I tried to speak the words, my throat seemed to constrict, silencing me. So I made the painful choice to keep my secret. In the following weeks, I attempted to appear normal in front of my husband. However, every touch, every kiss from him left me feeling like a fraud, as if I were deceiving him, living a lie. I found myself trapped in a state of guilt and fear, unable to escape. Then one day, George attended a seminar organized by my department. My husband was the guest speaker at the event. Seeing George filled me with dread, as he was aware of our shared secret and could expose the truth if he wished. Fortunately, he chose to remain silent and never acknowledged me in any way during his time on campus. While relieved that he hadn't revealed our secret, my guilt only intensified, lurking like a ticking time bomb ready to detonate at any moment. The inevitable day of reckoning arrived. It was a Monday morning, and I was running late for work. I had a meeting with a colleague, and I was already 10 minutes behind schedule. I hastily grabbed my bag and left the house, only to realize I had left my phone at home. Panic briefly overcame me, but I decided to continue to the university, accepting that I would be tardy for my meeting. I couldn't afford to turn back and risk further delays. My husband had no morning commitments and was planning to arrive separately for an afternoon meeting. Upon my arrival at the university, I rushed to my meeting, a sense of unease gnawing at me. Despite the meeting being productive, the feeling that something was amiss lingered. As soon as the meeting concluded, I hurried back to my office, my anxiety growing. After the meeting concluded, I hurriedly made my way to my office. Upon opening the door, a startling sight awaited me. My husband was seated at my desk, holding my phone and scrolling through my messages. I stood frozen, realizing that a reckoning was imminent. My small mistake had finally caught up with me. My husband raised his eyes to meet mine, a profound sense of betrayal etched in his gaze. At that moment, I felt like the greatest fool on earth. He rose from his seat and handed me my phone, his voice barely above a whisper as he questioned, "Why did you do it?" He had meticulously examined my text messages with George, reading our flirtatious exchanges, references to the kiss, and the content of our texts. I found myself utterly speechless, aware that there was no justification for my actions. All I could do was lower my head in shame and await the consequences. My husband explained how he had sensed something amiss in my behavior during the past few weeks, believing it was related to our disagreement about having a baby. Consequently, he had offered me space, assuming I was still upset. He expressed his disbelief, saying, "I never thought you'd betray me like this." He left my office without uttering another word, leaving me alone with my overwhelming guilt and shame. I recognized that I had irreparably damaged his trust, uncertain if I could ever regain it. For what felt like hours, I sat at my desk, numbed by shock and remorse. I had obliterated the most precious aspect of my life, my marriage, all due to a thoughtless kiss. Later, I returned home, compelled to clarify the situation with my husband, emphasizing my love for him. He sat on the living room couch, sipping his whiskey. Approaching him, I attempted to hold him, explaining what had occurred. However, he rebuffed my touch and pushed me away, his eyes filled with cold detachment and seething anger. I understood that I had deeply wounded him, and there seemed to be no way to make amends. An urgent need to elucidate the situation engulfed me. I confessed that the kiss had been a result of extreme intoxication, emphasizing it was merely a kiss. He regarded me with intense anger but remained silent before ultimately leaving the house. In the following days, my husband barely uttered a word to me. It was as if I had become invisible. Despite my pleas for forgiveness, he steadfastly avoided making eye contact or acknowledging me. I felt like a wandering ghost within our home, devoid of purpose. Weeks passed with us coexisting under the same roof, but seldom exchanging words. Despite my attempts to bridge the gap, he consistently rebuffed my advances, refusing even to meet my gaze. Every effort I made proved futile, including trying to embrace him while he slept, only to be met with rejection. Initially, I harbored hope that our relationship could mend through my persistent efforts to earn his forgiveness. I believed that we could discuss what had transpired and find a path forward. However, it appeared my husband had already made up his mind about the course of action he wanted to take. One day, he approached me, expressing a desire to talk. I eagerly listened, hoping for a sign of forgiveness and a chance to restore our relationship. Unfortunately, my hope was swiftly shattered when he requested that I vacate the house. He explained his need for space to clear his thoughts, emphasizing the difficulty of doing so with me present. I was devastated by this turn of events, unable to fathom that it had come to this. Though I didn't contest his decision, a small part of me clung to the possibility that our time apart might rekindle our connection. I rented a modest apartment in town and relocated from our home. Leaving the house was an emotional struggle, and I didn't pack all my belongings, clinging to the hope of returning and resuming life with my husband. Adjusting to my solitary existence in the apartment proved to be a lonely and challenging experience without his presence. I spent the majority of my days, often in tears, dwelling on the regrettable events that had unfolded. Sometimes I sought refuge from my troubles by burying myself in work. I had requested to work from home because I was too overwhelmed by depression to face the outside world. One fateful day, the head of my department delivered shocking news. I had been immediately terminated from my job. I was left in a state of disbelief. It seemed as if my life was unraveling, with my marriage, home, and now my career crumbling before me. I had invested my heart and soul into my job, only to have it abruptly taken away due to a foolish error. To my surprise, it appeared that my husband played a role in this unfortunate outcome. While he had always exhibited controlling tendencies, I never imagined he would go to such lengths. Despite my desperate pleas, the head of the department remained resolute in their decision. They revealed that my husband had personally called and demanded my termination, threatening to resign if they did not comply. He had wielded his influence and authority within the university to orchestrate my dismissal. Left without a job and a place to call home, I felt utterly adrift and powerless. The weight of guilt and shame from my transgressions still burdened my heart, and now I had to grapple with the repercussions of my husband's vengeful actions. Days turned into weeks, and I struggled to make ends meet. My savings were meager, and despite applying for jobs far and wide, I received no offers. I felt like a failure in every aspect of my life. However, an unexpected turn of events occurred when George reached out to me. He had resorted to emailing me since I had blocked his contact on my phone. Retrieving my mail wasn't a challenge, since George also worked as a professor at the university where I used to be employed. He informed me that he had heard about my situation and expressed a desire to assist me. Initially, I hesitated because in many ways, he was the root cause of my predicament. I was already without a job, and my husband harbored strong resentment toward me. I couldn't fathom how things could worsen, so I decided to meet George to see what he had in mind. Our rendezvous took place at a cozy cafe near my apartment. George was impeccably dressed in a sharp suit and wore a charming smile. He kindly offered to buy me a coffee, and we settled at a small table by the window. As I poured out my troubles to him, he attentively listened. I divulged the entire saga involving my husband, my job loss, and my life spiraling out of control. Speaking with him brought a sense of relief, as if a heavy burden was finally lifting from my chest. It marked the first time I had shared my ordeal with someone. After I had finished recounting my troubles, George remained silent for a moment. Then, he leaned forward and gently took my hand. In a soft tone, he apologized, expressing his unawareness of the extent of my suffering. His gaze locked onto mine, and for an instant, I felt myself immersed in his eyes. They held a warmth and kindness I hadn't encountered in a long time, almost providing solace. "I want to help you," he offered, his gesture comforting. Despite appreciating his offer, I initially declined, fearing it would only further enrage my husband. I didn't want to exacerbate the situation. However, as my circumstances grew increasingly dire with each passing day, I found myself contemplating George's proposition more seriously. With no other viable options and believing in George's genuine intent to assist, I reached out to him. He had connections within the academic realm and promised to aid me in securing a new job. My attempts to communicate with my husband had been futile. He had been avoiding my calls and refused to acknowledge my existence. I had called him repeatedly to discuss my job termination, but his silence was deafening. Thus, I informed George of my change of heart, and he proceeded to help me secure a new position at a different university. I had a glimmer of hope that my life was finally getting back on track. Securing a job marked the first step toward making everything right. George also assisted me with my CV and cover letter, and I expressed deep gratitude for his help. We hadn't been friends for long, yet this guy was going above and beyond for me. I suspected that George was motivated to help me due to his own guilt regarding what had transpired. We refrained from any flirting or inappropriate behavior. His approach to assisting me in finding a job was sincere. My thoughts often drifted to my husband, and I yearned to earn his forgiveness. I made an attempt to speak with him at the university, but he didn't even acknowledge me, simply instructing me to leave. My desperation to win back his forgiveness was growing. Weeks passed, and I settled into my new job. The work was demanding but fulfilling, and I was gradually rebuilding my life. Despite multiple attempts, my husband never answered my calls or responded to my messages. I continued to reside alone in my small apartment, with George as my sole confidant. Just as I was finding stability in my work, I was unexpectedly terminated from that job as well. I suspected that my husband was behind this setback as well. I visited my husband at his home and confronted him, questioning what he wanted by continuously taking away my job opportunities. He grew furious and claimed that I should have considered the consequences before cheating on him. My husband had learned from his friends that I had obtained my new job with George's assistance, which led him to believe I was having an affair with George. He expressed his hatred for me and wished he had never met me. His intense anger frightened me. I attempted to explain that nothing was happening between me and George. He was merely helping me find work. I swore it was the truth, but my husband remained skeptical. In my desperation, I tried to justify the events of that fateful night once more, emphasizing how intoxicated I had been with too many vodka shots. However, my husband scoffed at my attempts, refusing to accept my justifications. That night, it felt like I had lost my husband. The distance and iciness in his voice made it evident that he no longer wanted anything to do with me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I left his house, this time with the sinking feeling that I might never return. I continued applying for jobs elsewhere, only to face rejection at every turn. I also distanced myself from George. Seeing him brought back the guilt of that night when we kissed and served as a painful reminder of all that followed. One day, as I returned to my apartment following another job interview, I discovered an envelope awaiting me. It contained divorce papers sent by my husband. Tears welled up as I gazed at the papers, realizing that my marriage was ending because of my actions. It hit me hard, understanding that a single kiss had unraveled my entire world. I never imagined that one mistake could cost me my marriage and much more. Yet here I was, alone and without anyone to lean on. My circle of friends in town was limited, and those I knew were also friends with my husband, making it unlikely they would side with me at the cost of their friendship with him. My family had moved to another state due to my dad's job transfer. The following days felt like a painfully extended nightmare. I cycled through various emotions from sadness and anger to guilt and despair. Eventually, I reached a point where I felt nothing at all and recognized that the only path forward was to gradually rebuild my life on my own. I took a deep breath, wiped away my tears, and realized it was time to confront reality and move forward. I made the difficult decision to sign the divorce papers. There was no point in fighting for my marriage when my husband had given up on it and, understandably, on me. I accepted the responsibility for my actions and understood his decision. I signed the papers and visited my husband's house to deliver them and collect my remaining belongings. He opened the door and allowed me in. After giving him the papers, I explained that I needed to gather my things as well. He simply nodded and stepped aside to grant me access to the bedroom. While going through my belongings, I stumbled upon a small note my husband had written for our first anniversary. It read, "I love you more than anything in this world. You are my life, my soulmate, and my partner in crime. Happy anniversary, my love." The note brought tears streaming down my face. How had things gone so awry? How did our love dissipate? I packed my belongings as best as I could and left his house. hoping for a fleeting, longing glance from him, but only encountering coldness in his eyes. Upon returning to my apartment, I decided to take a break from everything and embarked on a walk. Lost in thought, I wandered aimlessly and failed to notice an oncoming car speeding toward me. A stranger intervened, pulling me to safety just in the nick of time. This incident jolted something within me. I resolved not to remain a damsel in distress any longer and to seize control of my life. I sent a message to my husband, stating that if he was resolute in his decision, I wished for the divorce to be expedited. He didn't respond directly, but his lawyers contacted me and assured me that the divorce proceedings would be swift since it was an amicable divorce. They outlined the terms, including a fair division of my husband's life earnings. I understand I didn't merit it, and he wasn't willing to share with me willingly. Legal obligations required him to do so. I asked them to relay to my husband that I didn't require his money or assets. Despite losing my job and needing the money more, I hoped this might lead to his forgiveness. Unfortunately, it didn't. The lawyers contacted me later, explaining that my husband had stated it wouldn't impact his decision. Our divorce proceedings commenced promptly and proceeded as smoothly as possible. During our court appearances, my husband never cast a glance in my direction and communicated solely with his attorneys. His chilly demeanor deeply pained me. The court granted our divorce within 3 months. I clung to hope until the last moment. When the judge inquired if my husband was certain about proceeding, I waited for him to say otherwise. However, that moment never arrived. My husband appeared relieved to sever all ties with me after the divorce, while I continued to miss him every day. I wished I could turn back time and rectify my mistake, but that remained a mere wish. I had to bear the burden of destroying my relationship with my husband for the rest of my life. After the divorce, I had lunch with a friend who had reached out, mentioning it had been a while since we connected. I wasn't particularly enthusiastic, but I agreed nonetheless. This friend was a mutual acquaintance of mine and my husband's. She informed me that my husband had begun dating again. As soon as the words left her lips, she realized what she had disclosed and promptly changed the topic. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. I acknowledged my grave error but still loved my husband deeply and hadn't contemplated moving on. Yet he seemed to have moved forward effortlessly. I probed for more information, but she remained tight-lipped. I had no one but myself to blame for my predicament. Had I not made that foolish mistake, I'd still be at home with my husband. I can't alter the past, so I'm focused on adapting to the current changes. I realized I couldn't keep encountering my husband or witness him with another woman. To escape this pain, I thought leaving town was the best solution. No one was likely to offer me a job here, especially now that my divorce was public knowledge. I secured a job in a nearby town, albeit with a significantly lower salary than what I used to earn alongside my husband. With no other choices, I accepted it and relocated. My presence doesn't matter to anyone in this town, one way or another. I'm simply trying to get through each day for now. Some days are exceedingly tough. I'm contemplating saving some money and seeking therapy. Perhaps it can help alleviate the guilt weighing on me. I'd appreciate hearing your thoughts. Update. To those inquiring about my current well-being, thank you for asking. To be honest, I'm uncertain if I'm okay or not. Processing everything that has occurred remains challenging, but I attempt not to dwell on it excessively. Whenever I reflect on the past few months, it leads to breakdowns. I'm hoping that time will bring improvement. Regarding the comments asking if my husband or I attempted to contact each other post-divorce, I did make an effort to reach out, but he blocked my number and other social media platforms. I sent him a letter apologizing and expressing my hope for a conversation, but as expected, there was no response from him. Update. It's been over a year since my last update. Much has changed since then. I believed I was finally making progress in life. My breakdowns had become less frequent. I was actively attending therapy sessions. Fortunately, I hadn't lost my job, which was as good as it could get. Over the past year, I made several attempts to reach out to my ex-husband, but he never responded. I even sent birthday wishes via mail, and our anniversary was especially tough for me. Despite my efforts, he remained silent, still blocking me on his phone. I knew he was dating someone, as a friend had informed me. I thought that with time, he might have forgiven me, and, at the very least, engaged in a conversation with me. Simply talking to me would have meant a lot, but that hope dwindled, and I started trying to move forward with my life. Just as I was taking steps to move on, a recent event set me back. Last month, I had to visit the town where my ex-husband resides for some document verification. I needed his signature on certain documents and tried to contact him through email, but received no response. Eventually, I decided to go there in person. Perhaps a small part of me sought any excuse to see him again. Meeting him after such a long time made me incredibly anxious. When I rang his doorbell, I was taken aback by what I encountered. A young woman opened the door, who was not only quite attractive, but also visibly pregnant. It was clear she was carrying his child, and it stung to see another woman in his home in that condition. The thought of how it could have been me in that situation hit me hard, especially since we had argued about having a child on the night I went out with George. Guilt washed over me as I stood there, envisioning how things might have been different if we'd had a child to connect us. I struggled to hold back tears, reminding myself not to cry in my ex's house in front of the woman carrying his child. I introduced myself and explained the need for his signature. She recognized me and said he was out, instructing me to leave the documents with her. She would take care of sending them to me. It felt like I was being pushed out of the house that had once been mine. With tears in my eyes, I nodded and provided my address before leaving the house. After that day, I began experiencing breakdowns once again. I started having dreams about him, that woman, and their child. I scheduled a therapy session, but even that didn't provide relief. I've come to realize that I cannot escape the weight of this guilt and regret. It will always be with me,